Welcome, everyone. This is our fourth installment of the PIP-MG webinar series, and we're really excited to have you here. We have a great session today. I first want to talk through our upcoming schedule of events, and we're excited about some of the developments that have happened since our last session. So let me share my screen briefly and show you some of these activities. So for those who have attended the first few, we kicked off in February. We had a session in March about ascending the portfolio optimization maturity curve. That was with Tom Heaps Nelson. And that session is recorded and the slides are available on PIP-MG website. We then had a session at the end of March with Claudia Campbell-Matland. That was around device project management and applying agile methodologies. And that session is also recorded, slides are available. And today we have John presenting on the interface of project management and alliance management. So great session today. I do want to put a plug in for the conference coming up at the end of May. The early bird sign up ends tomorrow. So please sign up for that if you're in the London area or plan to travel to the London area. More information about that is on the PIP-MG website if you go to the events tab. Later in the year, so second half of the year in June, we'll have a presentation from the VP of Program Management at TrialSpark. This is an interesting case where TrialSpark was previously a CRO and they've converted into being a sponsor. So how do they take their CRO experience and turn that into developing drugs? And then we'll talk more about decision making with a session with Sarah Hudson later in July. In August, we have a session about being a project manager in a early research company, a pre-IND company. That's with Paul Cook. And we have more. So there are more webinars coming in collaboration with APM. And so we're excited to put those on the calendar soon. And then a reminder, we do have the conference in November, and this will be a topic of managing cell and gene therapy projects. Okay, so exciting lineup. I'll stop sharing here. And want to make a note here, this session will be recorded. The slides will be available. Thank you, John, for making that available. Those will be on our website in a few days after this. I want to introduce John. John is a consultant. He specializes in collaboration in life sciences. And this is project collaborations, alliances, CRO partnerships. He's ex-pharma. He was a scientist, but spent most of his career as a freelancer, working for many large and small clients in biopharma. He's currently with a small company called PPMLD in the UK. Most of his work is as an associate with PIP-MG and with Viteros. So we're happy to have John here today. And John, I will turn it over to you to share screen and get us started.
Thank you very much, Joe. Let me pause just for a second so I can do my sharing stuff. And here we go.
Just a quick note while we're doing that, please note that the chat is open. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. If it's something that we need to address while he's on that slide, I'll call it out. If it's something that we can wait till the end, we'll do a Q&A session at the end. And I'll also note, if you need a direct message to me, you can do that separately. So there's the everyone option and direct messages. All right, John, back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Well, it's great to be here, everybody. I'd like to give you my perspective of alliances in the life science sector and say that, first of all, in a sense, alliance working should be easy. Organizations working together who all have something to gain. And also putting together some usually very talented and enthusiastic people. But somehow it often isn't as easy as that. And it's the people who are not in charge of the arrangements, i.e., the people at the coalface, the project teams who get a lot of stress with it sometimes. But in business terms as well, we still find a mix of good practice in the industry, but many alliances that are failing to deliver the value that was set out for them at the beginning. So what are the things that I'd like to talk about? What will you see in this webinar? It's not just me, but let me explain. Firstly, in a second, I'd like to quickly hear from you. We're going to do a couple of polls. We're going to cross our fingers with that because Joe's having to run them, and be patient. We'll get them going in a second. The main body is, for me, is my view of some best practice that ideally will overcome common challenges in Alliance. But where I can, relating things specifically to the project manager because of our audience today. What is the impact on project managers? What can the project manager do in certain situations? But as I'm an industry observer and consultant and not currently an active practitioner, I thought it would be valuable to incorporate some other perspectives into this webinar. So I'm not going to speak for desperately long, and I'm pleased that we'll hear from some others. We're hearing from Karen Skinner, who is a manager in a smaller sized organization called LifeArc, and also someone who I've yet to meet yet, but has stepped in last minute, Karim Khoury, who is from AstraZeneca, and will share some of his thoughts. We also had another volunteer in this topic called Jayashri, who's on the webinar with us, who we're going to give a little bit of time to share her thoughts as well towards the end. And I think Joe's mentioned about the Q&A. We'll complete with Q&A and stick those questions into the chat, please. So first of all, let us share some of these polls, and I'm going to just quit this. Hopefully I can quit. I can't. Stop sharing, please. Okay, I didn't manage to end my slideshow there, but I think I've stopped sharing. So we're going to do a couple of polls. And I think the first one is for people, it's not necessarily for everybody, it's people who've been around a while and it might be working in alliances for some time. As it says, the last major when it says stuff, apologies, that should be study on the health of alliances, was about 8 years or so ago. How have things changed if you have experience over this time? If you have experience, choose one of these options now as to what you think about the state of alliance working in our typical life science business.
And John will give about 30 or 45 seconds for people to fill in here.
Yes, that's right.
We have.
Okay. Joe, you should be seeing stuff coming in now. Is that right?
I do.
I'm crossing my fingers because Joe's in charge.
We have half people have responded so far.
Okay. Okay, we won't drag this on forever. We'll just give it some few more seconds, and then we'll hopefully Joe will be able to share the results with all of us.
All right, looks like it stopped here.
So when you're,
I will end
when you're ready.
The poll and I'll share.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. Well, so hopefully we can all see that. The good news is it doesn't look as though it's got worse than it did before. But there's an interesting mix between people saying things are better and people saying there's still a sort of mix of good and bad. That's great. So let's close that one, Joe, and just run number 2. Cross my fingers to see if that one will work. So, okay, assuming number 1, that you're interested in this topic, and number 2, you may be working in a company that has alliances sort of going on. If that's true for both of you, for both those things, perhaps you can fill in this poll. What are the most common problems for you? And apologies, you might have a number of them, but choose one of those now, please. Same schedule, Joe, please.
Okay, we have 60%.
Great.
And I will, still some coming in, so I'll let it stay open.
Okay. I'm going to try and take a note of the response to these. Very brief one to see if I can reflect them. Thank you, Joe. Okay. It's very interesting. Well, there's a clear winner there on mismatches between us and the alliance partners, working in different ways, with some backup results there on slower progress is the next one, and so on. Okay, let me just note something here. Okay, Joe, thank you very much for that. So I'll get back to sharing if I can. Here we are. I just should be back on the slide I was on. And let's begin by sharing what I think are some typical challenges in alliances. And this is not necessarily a complex list, but these are things I've seen. There's 5 real examples that I've seen in my time and that you may well have experienced. And the first one I need to preface by just saying that this is a typical simplified alliance life cycle. Many organizations have their own life cycle process, which is much, much more complex, but it boils down often to these sorts of things. What I'm really using it to illustrate is that as the deal is built, the project system, the project manager, the project team are sometimes included later and slower than perhaps they should be. Why is this? Well, it may be that there is an intense focus on perfecting a contract and many issues that have to be resolved before things can kick over. It may be because the project teams are very, very busy, and really it would stress them to be involved before they absolutely have to. Or it may be that we just don't think we should involve people. It does mean that there is little time sometimes to launch properly. There's a lot of high expectation for instant results, and it means there's delays and confusion sometimes, and a little uncomfortableness there. Secondly, another thing we find is that organizations, teams, comfort zones tend to be internal. They develop capabilities and processes which external partners find it difficult to integrate with. It may seem if alliance partners, who may well have a different structure and a different way of operating, which was interesting, this was #1 in our poll that we've just done, are sometimes not understood and not taken into account. But even if they have a very similar way of operating, sometimes they might feel that they are tolerated rather than fully included. So our internal models don't necessarily develop to reflect external partnering. So a third challenge, and I've seen a couple of examples of this. There might be some initial contact between the internal team, which is described here in the green colors, and the project people in an external team, which is described by the red guys sitting around the table there. But what sometimes appears in the middle of something is that barriers go up, no-go barriers. People are told not to talk to their counterparts sometimes, and it often seems very unnatural. On occasion, I've seen some examples where it's transpired that the entrepreneur owner of this smaller alliance partner, here represented by the guy wearing the crown on his head, has ulterior motives, is actually only seeking to sell the business. and is directing the alliance towards that end. And this turns into something extremely demotivating for people who want to generate something of value. A fourth thing is, well, let me put up the subheading here. It's obvious, isn't it? Well, when I say it's obvious, what I mean is that it's very easy to read the books about what you should expect if, say, you are a UK or US firm starting to work with an Asia Pacific team. But it's really easy to get it wrong. These assumptions and stereotypes are often not right. If you haven't got people together with the agenda, specific agenda, to explore their differences, just sort of getting to work and getting going will mean that they won't surface naturally, and many misunderstandings could continue and possibly lead to fatal errors going forward. And the last one, and it's a little bit of a cheeky one, I guess, but is working with academics. It's very valuable for us to be able to strike alliances with academics, but sometimes people observe that it can be a little awkward. Universities will have a high mix of enthusiasm and deep expertise, but by definition, they work in different ways. They have different structures, different drivers, different success measures. And one thing that some people have told me is that their reading of objectives is very complex sometimes, and shifting and changing, something which is in this day and age sort of anathema to us in industry, if you like. So these are some examples, and what I'd like to move on to is some views of some best practice and some what I call sort of critical success factors. There's much to be read about alliance success. There's lots of writing about it, but often things boil down to a few key factors, which I just like to talk through, but also mention some relation to the project manager role as well, which is often left out of such writing and in books and things like that. So first and foremost, probably no surprises, the value of aligned strategy, goals and values, and a full explanation, leader to leader, really, which might require workshops, lots of due diligence, lots of meetings, lots of nice dinners, possibly, so that really a deep understanding of each other and a win-win agreement can be thought about. And I have an interesting phrase here, which is leaders are more important than lawyers. It's far more powerful for leaders of two sides to have build a true understanding than perfect a perfect watertight contract, which we'll talk about in a little while. Is there anything a project manager can do in this situation? Well, sometimes not a lot. A project manager might not get involved in the beginning. But one of the things that project managers hopefully do well is seek information and ask questions. Seek to understand the alliance objective and rationale, and look for holes in it. One classic structure for doing this is so-called alliance pre-deal term sheet, where a document is put together with the basics of the alliance, all of the key deliverables expected, and a sort of draft set of detail about each side is responsible for, and so on. The project manager can add their push to the questioning of that and making sure they put in their feedback. Information needs to be provided in sort of due diligence investigations and so on, and they can help to make sure that's accurate and robust. And I would say one last thing in this short section here, section 1, which is that if there's an opportunity for any of you, I would say that there may not be, but if there is, use a new alliance to build your organization's capability. Do it really right this time, as it were. And you may not have the influence to suggest this, but certainly PIPMG can help in this sort of thing and make it work better. So, okay, what else? What next? Strong governance and leadership. Now, if I was invited into an organization to help them build a strong alliance, plus I was given a magic wand that I could use just once, what I would probably choose to make happen is that the first two bullets here should come true in terms of setting expectations and modeling good communication behavior. So often we hear of messy governance, ineffective joint steering, and this can make a huge difference to people's behaviors and people's work. Is there anything that PM can do? Well, at the very least, if there's an alliance management function, the project manager can build a very strong agreement on roles, on RACI, if you like, with the alliance manager to make sure they're exactly clear in their area of operation. They might be able to influence the governance level, query the development of governance structures and processes so that they can prepare to make it very clear to the project groups during the launch phase and how the governance should operate and so on. There's probably a lot more for where the project manager really makes an impact in the third one here. We often talk about the uncertain environment we have to work in. And the only certainty during the execution of projects is that something will change, which disturbs people's schedules and causes extra work and so on. And it's difficult enough internally, but across an alliance, it can lead to conflict about who should be responsible for what. And I believe that one of the key principles of alliances is that no contract with any amount of contingencies and fine drafting can cater for everything. What is so valuable is that the people skills that people bring to bear. And there are just some examples of the ways in which project managers can intervene to bring a sense of calmness into a conflict and move towards creativity, move towards problem solving. And if project managers, ensure that they are trained and experienced to do this, it can make a massive difference. And it's really necessary usually in busy alliance environments. I talked earlier about two teams being quickly pushed together in an alliance with an expectation that they'll generate results really quickly and collaborate naturally. Well, the latter can be achieved, but it does require some time investment. This is where the project manager, perhaps working initially with alliance management, if there is a function like that, can really deliver. To some extent, if I can use this phrase, being good cops and bad cops. So facilitating a really good get-to-know process, but also pushing hard for a thorough, efficient agreement on great communication. The experienced PM will keep a focus on good behaviors throughout as well, and periodically get people together and get their views on what's working well, what isn't, and what should be changed to keep things on track. Absolutely essential stuff. And we'll probably find that people in that environment will start to work naturally, collaboratively, in an empowered way to get things done. And we can get our hands off the accelerator a bit. I think the last of these points I want to make is the final factor in this set, is to avoid mismatches and duplication of information where possible. In the worst instances, I've seen situations where alliance partners have great, if not superior, say, templates and systems for particular aspects of work, but sponsoring companies refuse to use them, or their IT departments put a ban on it or something. But more commonly, I've seen situations where alliance management functions have designed a whole great suite of tools, but people from various functions still default to their homemade versions of things. What can project managers do here? Well, it's sort of chicken and egg a bit. I would expect PMs to build commitment with teams to use the proper systems and formats. That, of course, presumes that they exist. I think the most important thing is that the development of a suite of templates, toolkits, and so on should ideally be a partnership between the project management office and or the alliance management function and the people that are actually on the ground, so things that are built which are fit for purpose. So, okay, I have a summary, and there are some mindset shifts, I think, that are very helpful, that some of you, some companies are making massive strides towards, and others could take note of. And the first one is to focus primarily on relationships, not necessarily on timelines, on contracts, especially on legalities. It's relationships that really, in my view, drive success and can be pushed on to work hard. Secondly, rather than spending time on managing our opposite numbers, to make sure our internal people are aligned. Many alliances have been messed up by large opinionated managers disagreeing publicly in an internal organization and not having an aligned approach to their alliance partners. Oops, excuse me. And we talked about this earlier as well, understanding differences. And it was number one, I think, in our poll again, if I can remind you. People are different, they work differently. And generally, across an alliance, they can't be changed to our own way of working. We need to understand and embrace these differences and find a way forward with them. And that's been, well, not doing it has been proved time and time again to lead to trouble. Be prudent, be careful, but in general, we want to have a positive mindset, a trusting mindset with our partners, and really believe that that's going to happen rather than constantly being guarded and suspicious. Measure lots of things by all means, but occasionally measure the effectiveness of the partnership. There are many tools to do that. I have examples. PipMG can suggest examples of that, of how that can be done, and it can be extremely valuable to keep things on track. Lastly, encourage collaboration. Send leadership messages, if possible, about how important it is, how important the alliance is to the organization, and that we want to reward collaboration if we can. Okay, everyone, so that's my set. I'm going to stop sharing at that point. I'll show at this end. So, okay. Well, I have pre-prepped, hopefully, fingers crossed here, some of my colleagues. And Karen, I've sent Karen a few questions, which she can either talk about or ignore and talk about whatever what she wants, really. Perhaps in about 10 minutes or something. Let's just see how it goes, and or react to anything that I've said. So, Karen, over to you for your perspective on alliance.
Okay, thanks, John. I presume everybody can you can hear me, John, yeah? Okay, cool. Okay, well, if I just give a little introduction to myself first. So I'm Karen Skinner, and as John said, I can give a bit of a perspective that comes from small organisations. So the organisation that I worked at before my current organisation was a high growth biotech called BTG. So I worked there for about a decade, actually. So we started out, we were a very small organisation of about 65 people. We were significantly larger than that when I left, but throughout that time, initially we didn't even have a PMO. As we grew, we established a PMO, and I led that group. And we had multiple strategic partnerships and alliances with other collaborators throughout my time there. We had a dedicated business development function. Even as we grew, we never got to the point of having an alliance management function. And so alliance management was generally done by the project leaders that we had, and with the team of the project manager, the project leader, and the business development lead. So that was the situation when I was there. And then now I work at LifeArc, which is a medical research charity. We're quite a small charity by size in that we have about 250 employees, but we're a very large charity by resources. So we've got significant resources at our disposal, which means we've got great ambitions. And actually, the whole ethos of LifeArc now is alliances and partnerships. And so actually, we've directed our strategy towards working in partnership with others. So we're forming major programs of work in order to tackle particular healthcare problems. So we put the patient first and then track back and think, okay, what life science solution would work best for these patients? And so we have therapeutics and diagnostics internally, but if the patient needs a device or the patient needs a digital solution, we will work with partners in order to bring that to them. And so actually our model is all about building an ecosystem of partners. And so we will work directly with patients to bring in the patient voice. We work with charities who have a lot of access to the patients. We work with other small enterprises. We work with the government to kind of work together with their funding, and then we work with pharma as well. So we're kind of forming alliances with every type of partner, I suppose you could say, within the whole life sciences ecosystem. And yeah, we still don't have an alliance management function, which is interesting. I don't know whether we'll get to that at some point, but today this is still managed by the PMO, the project management team. And I can see actually a few other members of the team at LifeArc are on the call, so that's nice. It's managed by the PMO and also the project leaders we have and the business development team. So that's our model for the moment. And therefore, yeah, I would say our project managers do need to be astute and good at alliance management and bringing into practice all the things that you suggested there, John. Some of the questions, so that's an intro to myself. The questions that you put to me, John, was where an example where it's gone well, an example where it hasn't gone well. Shall I start with the positive? Let's start with the positive. So when I joined LifeArc, we formed a major partnership with an organization called Kymab. Kymab have this fantastic technology and teleselect technology with their transgenic mouse in order to generate novel antibodies. And we built a lot of our organization around antibody technology. So we really wanted to bring that technology in-house. So we signed a license with Kymab to bring that technology in-house and also to train our employees. So actually that was quite a big alliance and a big program of work because we needed to bring in the transgenic mice. We needed to buy all the kit. We needed to get our facilities up and running and bring in all that kit. And we also needed to recruit people, the right kind of people to run these projects and upskill these projects. And I have to say that was a very successful piece of work, a very successful alliance. And I would say so for probably a lot of the reasons that John raised. First of all, it was really focusing on the relationship first. So actually one thing that was quite helpful for that is we're based in Stevenage in London. these guys were in Cambridge. So it's like, not for those of you that are in the UK, that's not so far apart. It's like about 30 miles away. So actually we had, you know, it wasn't a transactional relationship. We met with these people face to face several times and kind of built a kind of informal and friendly relationship with these partners, as well as the more business side of the relationship, which I think really helped build trust and make people feel more relatable to each other. One of the things that we did, it wasn't just a project management office, but it was all the way through all the people that were engaging with these partners, because it is usually a team, build relationships. So we had a joint steering committee, and so that happens kind of sometimes monthly, sometimes quarterly for bigger meetings. But then the project managers also met weekly, but then the teams also had their points of contact. And so actually, you know, we formed kind of relationships, I would say, throughout, and kept those kind of channels of communication open all the time. One of the really important things we did, and I noted, John, you kind of talked about managing internal stakeholders. What we were super careful to do is our project team, the project manager kept our executive updated on what was happening. And that happened on their side as well. But what we didn't allow happen was for their executive management, when there was an issue, go to our executive and then end up having conversations at a senior level. Because as soon as you let that happen, you undermine the credibility of the team, and you kind of think, okay, these people can't make decisions anymore now, and I'm going to have to involve these things. So whenever people try that, what I consider to be a bit of a dirty tactic, because that happens a lot when people are uncomfortable with what's happening, they'll reach out to your CEO, and as soon as that CEO responds directly, you've had it in terms of you being able to handle that. So your CEO needs to be on board and like refuse to respond and come back through the team so that you gain that control again. So I felt that that was something that and you've got to both play by those rules. So actually I felt like that was something that was working well on both sides. And other than that, it's just, I suppose, the obvious of having really clear roles and responsibilities. You know, we really laid it out, like, so there was no confusion in a template. These are all the things that are happening, and then they're doing this and we're doing that. So there was no room for error in understanding of who would be doing what. So I would say that's an example of where something's gone really well. An example, John, I can hear you talking, but you're muted. Has somebody taken?
Okay, it's fine. I just got a message saying the host is not allowing people to unmute, which is, you know.
Oh, what did other people want to interject as well?
I'm not sure. I just wanted to say a couple of minutes for the bad one, Karen, if there is a bad one.
Oh, right. Yeah. Do you want me to give you? I'll do a bad one now.
Yeah.
Well, is negative? But I suppose one that didn't go so well, maybe in my time at BTG. So at BTG, we were, I was running an interventional oncology program, and we wanted to form alliances with big pharmaceutical companies that had their immuno-oncology programs. And I imagine a lot of people are aware of the impact that PD-1 inhibitors have had in the world, the likes of Keytruda, but they don't reach all patients. And so there was very much a strong rationale for using combination therapies, coupling these immuno-oncology agents with other agents that impact on tumors to try and therefore reach a greater population. The problem is the big pharmaceutical companies were being approached by everybody to try and combine their product with their immunotherapeutic. And so so I felt like in those, we did eventually get a collaboration, but in terms of talking to those big pharmaceutical companies, the problem there was just the power imbalance that they held. They are so much bigger than us, that they hold all the cards and I suppose all the power in that relationship. So when we go and talk about trying to find a win-win, when it's very difficult to see a win-win, and actually the other parties holding all the cards, that really makes it a bit tricky to have those conversations.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Karen. We had someone lined up to help out with this called Phil Mallender, who's a friend of ours from AstraZeneca. And he was dragooned away at the last minute, and at the very last minute, dobbed in his colleague Kareem. So thanks for coming, Kareem. With a similar brief, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and share a few examples with us, Kareem, please?
Absolutely. I guess just to check in, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
And John, Joe, thanks for having me. I'll do my best Phil impression if I can. My name's Kareem Khoury. So I've been with AstraZeneca for about 4.5 years. And for the majority of my time here, I've been working in a partnership with Daiichi Sankyo, so another big pharmaceutical company. I've been in project management since my start, but still relatively new to the industry when I joined AstraZeneca. So I'll go ahead and start with my, I'll say not so good example, or where things didn't quite go to plan, because it does help lead into when things did go to plan. So, when we first signed on this deal, we were not involved at the start at the signing. John, just kind of as you had noted, we got all the information and we were tasked to kind of execute on a plan that was given to us. In our governance process, the structure was such that, the alliance governance has final say on all major decisions, and, company specific governances were consultants, or to be consulted on all these decisions. So in one of our first study designs to get that to an ID, we took that to heart. We had an alliance position. We went to one of our first governances. We got some feedback. We talked about it as an alliance and didn't really take all of their, we took their considerations. We decided why we didn't want to, follow their recommendations, and decided to move forward. At our second governance interaction, as you can imagine, it didn't quite go as well as we had wanted or expected. Pretty much being called out for not taking any of their advice. So we obviously had to, rework the plan for that particular study, but it also meant we really had to reevaluate the whole portfolio and how we got any of these decisions made. So while there was the theoretical structure, how are we going to work in practice? To the point where we've built in, what I'll call an alliance tax in trying to get any decisions, major decisions through, making sure we have enough time, get to my governance, get to your governance, get to the alliance governance, kind of keep these circles moving back and forth, so that we could get to those points. Now, 4 years in, I think we've figured out that process pretty well, and to the point where we've even been able to modify the process with our alliance management team. So a bit of an eye-opening experience there that caused us to have to reevaluate every major step we were going to take and how we would get those decisions made. That's kind of, I'll say, when things didn't go to plan. Kind of shifting to when things did go to plan. About 1.5 years into the alliance, we had one of our first major high-level results, so study readouts. And we had been given a process for how the communication was to go, in our files somewhere, and we had dug that out. But I had sat down with my counterpart over at Daiichi Sankyo, and we had one of our many heart-to-hearts about what the process looks like on paper versus what it, how we should actually execute. So the months leading up to that, those results being available, we painstakingly went through, rebuilt this process, talked to every single person that would need to touch it, make sure all senior leadership was aligned, plotted this out in great detail. We were on the phone with each other and our communications, IR, every function that would need to eventually touch this governances as well, to make sure we had this process down to a science, to the minute of when and where and how. And more importantly, this had to be done in a short amount of time, which isn't something, we're great at within the alliance. And so condensing it to a short amount of time, but also ensuring that we were all speaking with one voice when we went to our separate governances. One set of key messages was going everywhere. So I will say, when the time came from when those results were available through that whole process, the feedback we got was that it went very, very smoothly. And it's because we took that time, we had that relationship to build and that understanding of really how we each worked and how we could take each other's processes and kind of meld them into this alliance process. Again, we've been using that now over the last few years, and I think kind of building those as you move through the alliance and reevaluating has been key.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Kareem. Interesting perspectives there, everyone. I'd like to ask if, before I do a little entree to it, if Jayashree still on the call, Joe? Do you know?
Hi, yes, John, I'm here. I hope you can see
Hello.
me.
Okay, this has been an interesting planning for this webinar. Has been interesting. Is that we a couple of months ago we had someone else as the host of this webinar, and then that didn't work out. So I took over the reins of it, and within a couple of weeks of my preparation, Jayashree contacted us and said, "Would you be interested in doing a webinar around alliance management?" And we said, well, yes and no, really, because we've got someone in already. So, Jayashree's kindly turned up, actually. Jayashree's from Calico. So just from what you've heard, Jayashree, and from some of your experience, anything to add about sort of best practice and examples or anything from your point of view as well? We'd be pleased to hear it.
Yeah, thank you so much, John and Joe, again, for this opportunity. So to introduce myself, I'm the Associate Director of Program and Alliance Management at Calico Life Sciences, which is a company in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have several alliances with both industry and academia, the largest of them being with AbbVie. So, John touched on a lot of pertinent points, and, Karen and Kareem have also sort of belabored some of the points, which I think I'm also sort of going to be the squeaky wheel and reiterate that good alliance management goes hand in hand with good project management. I think, some of the points that we've touched on is when the alliances are made, they are probably not taking into account the day-to-day operations which live with the teams. And I firmly believe that an alliance is as good as the teams that are operating on both sides. So, as we discussed before, the governance model makes a lot of difference, and also how teams operate day to day makes a lot of difference. And, we saw the poll at the beginning of this webinar where everybody said mismatch in how the teams operate, is key. And I agree with that. And I think that's sort of where we can focus for successful alliances, is to sort of drop that idea of trying to fit one party into another party's operating model and build a fit for purpose model. And that needs to have buy-in from both parties. And also day to day, it's easier said than done, because the team members are still accountable ultimately to their organization. So what does success look like within this framework that could be different from their regular day-to-day operations? That needs to be defined as well. And really understanding those factors that influence day-to-day operations can then benefit the health of the alliance and make it more successful.
Okay. Thank you, Jayashree. I just want to comment on expand on one thing you've also said about mismatches and differences, and just share a little anecdote, which is, you probably remember, everybody, experiences that you've had of either going to the US, for instance, and meeting some colleagues for the first time and socializing with them, or the other way around, going to the UK and socializing there. What do you talk about? Well, all sorts of things, I guess. But if you're anything like my experience, you spend a long time talking about, oh yeah, well, over here it's like this. Oh, we do this. What? We do that? Oh yeah, we do this sort of thing. And there's a tremendous amount of chat about what's different, and it's fun, and it's the way people build trust with each other. And if we allow people to do that in a managed way, it actually forms a lot of good bonds, and it's a lot of fun to do. I think my message was just, if we say, well, we haven't had much time to involve you, but here, like Kareem was saying, you know, here's the plan. Really, you guys have got to get on with it. And you know, you can talk to each other, but what you're talking to each other straight away now about is the plan, and not, if you like, engaging in getting to know each other. And of course, that's often not paid work, you know, but it is so intensely valuable, so amazingly valuable to do. So there we are. So Joe, I think we've got the time where we need to say to everyone, are there any questions that from the audience?
I did review the chat. No questions came through there that I saw,
No, so
but I do have a follow-up question actually for everyone on the panel, and this hopefully sparks some debate. You know, you mentioned Jayashree, Kareem, you both mentioned that you're in kind of this dual role, the alliance manager and the project manager. Do you feel like that's best practice, or do you feel like they should be separate roles, knowing that the alliance manager is beholden to the relationship and the agreement, and the project manager is beholden to the project team and the project plan? And there's a conflict. There can sometimes be a conflict. So what are your thoughts?
I can go first if that's okay, Kareem. I actually feel like the synergies outweigh the conflicts, Joe. I actually do support that, you know, both project management and alliance management can be within one function, and actually benefits the collaboration because you approach it with both mindsets and try to strike a balance rather than one overpowering the other.
That's
So
a
we
good point. Just to clarify, within the same role, so the same person is the alliance manager and project manager. Okay. Yep. Kareem?
I think, I mean, we definitely have an alliance management team. I think we've got a close partnership, and kind of, I think I will try to leverage when we need to the alliance management relationship versus kind of the project management aspect as we're working through the joint teams. We know the process, we know the guidance, but what realistically is feasible? So I could see the benefit in maybe having that, you know, one role. To me, maybe feels a little bit, I don't know. I think there's actually a benefit, I'll say, the way that we operate now, and having that separation to leverage the two different relationships when necessary. It helps us to maybe draw that line a little bit.
Karen, did you have a perspective on it?
Well, I mean, one of my perspectives is just the efficiency of like another person that's involved. So actually, Kareem, I was going to ask you, with your actual alliance management team, do they only get involved in like really big partnerships? They're not, or are they involved in every alliance that you have?
So I'm only a part of this one big one. I do think they get involved as necessary in most. I don't know about the very small collaborations. I honestly couldn't tell you. I know for the big ones though, there's definitely an alliance manager. I think the involvement in their role though is heavily dependent on the size of the collaboration. So, you know, in these bigger collaborations, I definitely think that they're a bit more involved in the overarching processes, but they don't touch the project as much.
I can put an experience in there. When I was at AstraZeneca, I did also, as a project manager, I did also manage the alliance, but it was a very small material only alliance. So sometimes it depends on the contract type. If it's a full collaboration, development collaboration alliance versus just providing materials, it could be a different role. John, perspective.
Yes, just to add that Joe, I was thinking that myself, and it's an extremely pointed and valuable question, which is, do you really need an alliance management function? And actually, I've done some work for two large organizations who are going through some soul searching, and I was working for an alliance management function in one large organization as a consultant, and also a similar type, an outsourcing function in another one, which was looking at CROs and things like that. Both of them, interestingly, were fighting for status inside the organization, fighting to be listened to. they were developing a hell of a lot of best practice, big, toolkits and all sorts of stuff like that. But unfortunately, and this sometimes happens, they found themselves sort of out on a side as a center of excellence. And one of them described the fact that two big alliances, two, high value, big noise alliances between research in their area and external collaborators, in one of these, they weren't even allowed in. The big research project manager had so much authority and so micromanaging the whole thing that it didn't want to listen to the alliance management. And that one of the questions to me they asked was, can you help us get more influence to get into these alliances? And it it's not always the case, obviously. It really, really isn't. But I sometimes see internal functions saying a lot that you should be doing this, we should be doing that, we should be doing that, and shouting in the wilderness a bit. So sometimes there's a little bit of thought and caution needed, I think. And we have to be very careful, I think, about letting the best practice advice get ahead of the willingness of the people actually in the functions in the business to listen and getting too far ahead of them. I got into alliance work by partnering with a guy who was working in a very large organization, an alliance management department, and they developed this fabulous suite of tools. And at the end of his demo, I said, is anybody listening to all this? He said, well, not really, but we hope they will. But nevertheless, alliance working is a real critical part of the future of our sector, and we need to get it right.
John, I want to end it with a question to the panel again on, for junior alliance managers or for aspiring alliance managers, where would you go to learn more about the best practices across industries, across different types of alliances? Are there conferences? Are there communities of practice? Where do you learn more? Jayashree, maybe I'll ask you.
Yeah, there are conferences, alliance management conferences, and there's one coming up in November that's Association of Strategic Alliance Professionals. So I would definitely do that. And I think some of the functions that we work very closely with are business development. So that is another opportunity to work closely with the colleagues, and also, opportunity to learn about the business side of things. From a project perspective, always work with project managers. And so I think there's a lot of on-the-job learning that can help as well.
Great, thank you. Kareem, anything to add?
I'm gonna say I've learned this one on the job, so I'm always looking myself for new avenues to learn. So thank you. I'll definitely actually be taking a look at that, and I've got nothing formal that I'm aware of. So thank you for that.
Karen, anything else?
No, and I would just say some of the larger conferences that you have, with the APM and the PMI, they'll tend to have alliance management tracks within them. So I think if you're interested in that, you could go to that. But I typically have learned on the job as well, I think, from experience of other people that I've worked with.
That's great. And John, I'll send it to you and to close us out.
Yes, I would just recommend a couple of things. There's some great reading material on Harvard Business Review about alliances, both in the world generally and within life science. There's also probably one of the leading consultancies in the world in the past 10 years or more has been Vantage Partners. And they are much bigger than alliances now. They do all sorts of things, but they've got some great stuff. And they produced a landmark report on alliances, the state of alliances in the world, about 8 years ago, and a lot of people reference it, including me, still to this day. So we'll perhaps try and put that into the slide set, but it won't happen before next week for me. But there we are. So if it's all right for me to just close off from my point of view, thanks everyone for participating today in this. Please, if you may all be members of PIPMG, but we welcome you to join. I'm a member and I love being a member. Thanks very much to our extra speakers, Karen, Kareem, and Jayashree, for giving their perspectives. I think it's been really, really helpful. So that's all from me, Joe, and thanks to you very much for coordinating today.
And likewise, thanks to you and thanks to the panel. And we'll close it here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Ben.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.